one, and we're going to invite Sarah McMillan and I believe Aaron Eason to speak to the Care Here renewal.
All right, good morning, everybody. Just to give a little bit of background, Care Here is the district's administrator of the Complete Health and Wellness Center. The district's current contract with Care Here expires at the end of July. So that's why we conducted an RFP, which was completed in December. CBIZ really took care of that RFP for us. They provided a detailed financial and technical RFP summary of the 8 responses that we did receive. So of the 8 responses, Care Here submitted the lowest bid and actually did not have an increase in the cost. So Care Here maintained our current management fee, which is $11 per plan enrolled member per month. And then they continued with no markup to the pass-through costs. Pass-through costs really include the supplies that are used at the health center, labs, and then the personnel costs. So we are recommending to continue with Care Here as the service provider of the Health and Wellness Center. Care Here provides all of the services that we requested in the RFP, again, with the lowest cost. A couple of other pieces, continuation with Care Here will allow for our employees, our retirees, and family members who use the Health and Wellness Center to continue and not have a disruption to their personal care. So really employees as well as the district on this side of things, we've been extremely satisfied with the care and the services that Care Here has provided. The contract will be an initial 3-year term, then with 2 1-year extensions. And the contract was reviewed by district legal counsel. So at this time, Aaron Eason or I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, if there's no questions, we're going to move on to under contracts 1.02 restatement of the cafeteria plan document. And again, Sarah McMillan.
All right. Okay, so the government signed into law on March 11th the American Rescue Plan. There are a lot of pieces to that, but really what pertains to the district, it allows employers to increase the dependent care flexible spending account maximum from $5,000 to $10,500 for the 2021 plan year. The district, we currently have 42 employees participating in the dependent care flexible spending account, of which 34 have elected the maximum contribution of $5,000. So we are recommending to increase the 2021 limit to $10,500 because that could benefit those employees that are already electing that maximum $5,000 who have more than $5,000 in dependent care or daycare expenses. So in order for us to allow this change, the cafeteria or the Section 125 plan document has to be amended. So that is our recommendation. And again, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Sarah.
Right, you're welcome.
All right, we're going to move on to item 1.03, and Katie Bergen's going to speak to final site the website services and products.
I forgot I was muted. My apologies. Good morning, everybody. This is my first finance meeting, so I'm excited to be here. I'm going to talk about this agenda item, which is a 5-year agreement between LSR7 and Final Site, which is a website design company to design, develop, and host a new district site, as well as 30 additional program school department sites for LSR7. So that would be basically all of our school sites and our programs, except for our 3 high schools. And so New revamped websites are really part of the long-term public relations strategic plan, meeting our goals to adapt our portfolio of tools that we use to meet our patrons' needs, a desire to see improved websites and to find better ways to provide accessible public information was also a priority identified by our CSIP survey to our stakeholders this year. A need for a new streamlined process around websites was also identified in a survey sent to elementary webmasters this spring. So if this item is approved, we will enter a deployment period for Final Site for the next 6 or 7 months and collaboratively work with them to custom build new websites, a new design for the district, essentially rebrand our online presence with the hope of launching our new sites by January 2022. This item will be entirely covered by the public relations budget, both the setup fees and the annual costs. I can answer any questions that you might have.
I have just a quick one.
Sure.
So would the site webmasters that we have and then our technology staff at SLC, they would still be doing the maintenance and the adding and all of that to the site, or is this company doing everything?
This company won't be doing the day-to-day maintenance and managing of the websites. We will continue to have our webmasters. If you're a webmaster now and you want to keep being a webmaster next year, you will still be in that role. But what we are going to do is transition the management of our websites kind of on the front end and the back end to the public relations department. So we'll be taking some of those responsibilities away from our technology folks. Both departments are very much in favor of that sort of transition of responsibility. However, Final Site will take over tech support. And that's a really big piece of this. That's really important because right now, if you are an elementary webmaster, for example, and you have an issue with the website that you can't address because it's either beyond your capabilities or you may just not even have access to be able to change or fix that aspect of the website, you have to go through technology, which has so many important responsibilities, and that wait time might be extensive, or it might be an issue that takes a little bit of time to work out. So having that immediate 24/7 tech support from Final Site is a really important piece of this. They also just have a robust tutorial online boot camps, webinars on best practices for website management. That is something that obviously neither the public relations department or the technology department has the ability to provide that kind of ongoing professional development around website management.
So I think that sounds like a win-win for everyone. So just one other quick question, and I just thought of it. So sorry, I'm kind of thinking
That's
on the
okay.
fly this morning. So does this, will this be more, allow for more consistency in each of those websites? So they're pretty much look and feel the same and they operate the same as well then?
Yes, we'll have a consistent look and design sort of theme, if you will, between our district site and our school sites, really on the front end and the back end. So that's important aesthetically and from a navigation perspective. If you're a parent, we want you to feel like you're getting the unique person. We want our elementary schools or our middle schools, for example, to be able to have their unique online presence. However, we want a parent to be able to find the lunch menu or the calendar in the same place at a middle, whether you have a middle schooler or an elementary schooler. And right now we can't guarantee we have that consistency, but we also are going to get consistency on the back end. So right now, because we've internally hosted our websites historically, for lack of a better word, our websites are sort of a maze or a complicated web of things that have been added in this year. And there's not this universal administrative sort of organizational system. So we're basically going to bring, if you think of it like a house, and all our websites are rooms, we're bringing all the rooms into one house. And so from a PR management perspective, organizing all these websites under the same tree, if that makes sense, makes it easier for us to give support to elementary and middle school and program sites who might need it. It makes it easier for us to manage and update websites. Right now, we would need to do that individually, if that makes sense.
Sure. And the high schools are not part of this because of what?
we started a collaborative process with our high school webmasters and our high school principals back in January when we first sort of initiated our exploration process for what an external vendor for websites could be. The reason we did that is because, and many people might not know this, that our high schools have this rich tradition of basically, even before we had real world learning, having students participate in the management and really the design, the coding of our high school websites. So that is something that under the mentorship of our professionals, our instructors at the high school level, students are coding the high school websites through the basic and advanced web design classes. So we actually brought in the high school webmasters and some high school administrative representation when we met with vendors and tried to see how much these outside companies would allow you to manipulate code so we could essentially replicate the same learning experience that these students were getting now with our WordPress. So it's kind of a trade-off, right? WordPress leaves a lot to be desired right now in terms of meeting our technology and our communication needs as an entire district, but it's great from that learning perspective because it allows students to get right into the code, if that makes sense. Going outside, someone like me, for example, doesn't want to get into the code. I want a streamlined system that allows me to support the district's websites without needing to do that. So we spend some time trying to see if these external platforms would work, and ultimately concluded that we couldn't at this time replicate the learning experience that they're getting now with an outside vendor. I will say one of the reasons that we ultimately wanted to move forward with Final Site is because it allowed us to do the most in that area. So if high schools ever have that conversation that they want to move in a different direction in the real world learning that they're providing to their web design students, they want to go in a different place. Maybe they start designing for businesses. And I'm just imagining right now. Final Site offered them the most opportunity to replicate what they're doing now. They weren't entirely there, which is why we're not bringing them on board for this current migration. But we felt like it was probably the most realistic vendor that they would want to be part of in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't know this, so but I think that's a very relevant point that you've made, why the high schools will not be coming on. And maybe their websites have that on there, but I don't know. I've never seen it. And I've looked at them, but there may be, it may be a good idea to put something to that regard in terms of who manages or how that website is used. And so that we put on our each of those websites, how the students are involved in that. That might be something good for just for our community and parents and others to know that.
I think that's a great idea.
Katie, I have a couple of questions. I agree, Dr. Hedrick, that's a great idea. On this agreement, it was a little bit hard to tell at the end of the day who owns this content and coding. So if you got to a point in the contract where they weren't providing the services that we desired or that we had agreed to, would we get all of that? Or would that be under their ownership? Does that make sense?
We would own our content and they own their code, if that makes sense. We're kind of using their code to host our information. They're hosting it, but we would still have rights to our content. So we're basically migrating our content into their skin or their format, and we could migrate out if that was a decision that we made as a district.
The content, but not the layout and the structure and their
Well, and one of the things that I really appreciate about Final Site is they're going to build what set them apart from other vendors for us is that they're going to build a customized website for us. One of the things that other vendors might have offered is I'm going to try not to use the same words. We can basically incorporate you into a template and then personalize it. But what they're going to do is really work with us to build a customized Lee Summit website presence from scratch. So I don't think that's something that they would replicate in the same way with other people.
And did we go through an RFP process for this, or how was this vendor selected?
This vendor was selected, and we did not have to go through an RFP process because this vendor is a member of the TIPS cooperative, which is sort of a membership agency that allows us to get competitive contracts because we're part of this membership, if that makes sense. And I may have to defer further questions about that to Mrs. Battaglia if she's here, because I don't know the ins and outs of that. But it's because they were part of the TIPS co-op, we were able to move forward without an RFP. And Krista, I don't know if you would add anything to that.
No, you've covered it.
So at the end of 5 years, is there an extension opportunity, or what's the end game with the 5-year contract?
It's a 5-year contract now, which allows us to reevaluate in 5 years whether this is a product we want to continue with. I think that's really the appropriate amount of time. I know that's probably a longer contract time than some of the products we do, especially in the tech space. But really, this is not a decision we want to be making or changing every year. We obviously are going to go through a very extensive process to migrate our websites and to change our websites, and we're going to want to stick with it for a little bit to evaluate if it's working.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Sorry, I have one more question. You said, so what's the actual deployment timeline?
So we are going to pretty much, if this was approved by the board, we would start the process very quickly. And it's really a 6 or 7 month process where we collaborate with Final Site on the design. They're going to collaborate with our tech department on the actual technical migration. It's really important that this process wasn't rushed. So we opted for a longer deployment period, and that's why we're proposing a January 22 launch date. We also felt like if we're going to change our websites, it actually might be in the best interest of our patrons to do that in the middle of the year so that we're not changing everything up before the school year starts when people really just need things to be in the same place.
I remember you saying that earlier. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think for our community and for all the parents, that'll be a benefit.
Just kind of push the changes out so it's not in September or in August.
Great. Thank you.
No
Thank you,
problem.
Katie. All right, we're going to move on to item 1.04. We're going to have Keith Henry speak to the Mohawk lifts and heavy duty tire changer.
Good morning. We've reached that point. Our current tire machine has reached its end of life. So we were forecasting this. We started experiencing issues a few years ago, so we budgeted for this. At this point, we worked through cooperating purchasing through Missouri State contract to be able to find a machine at a really good price that will be effective for a long time. The return cost on investment will probably be less than 3 years on this, and we recommend approval of purchasing.
Any questions for Mr. Henry? Okay. All right, moving on to contracts 15,000 and under. If you have any questions for Mrs. Battaglia. Okay, not hearing any. All right, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is items 1.06, universal paper products and dispensing systems. And any questions? Krista, again, do you want to speak to this?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. We were utilizing a cooperative contract through our local Greater Suburban Kansas City Joint Purchasing Cooperative, which are a lot of the school districts around in our area. And unfortunately, that contract for universal paper, which is our paper towels and our toilet paper, it expires today. And we found out that the co-op was not ready to bid this out, and they were just going to do it sometime closer to the beginning of the new school year. And of course, we have a need for these paper products. So we kind of got together with the custodial staff and decided that we needed to do our own bid for these items. And so we did that, and we received 7 responses. And a team from facilities, custodial staff, and purchasing evaluated that. What we discovered was that no one company or vendor bid on everything that was on our list. So in our evaluation, we decided that Purizone and Hilliard combined gave us the best value for those paper products and dispensers. And that is what we're doing today, is recommending a yearly contract with them with 3 possible renewal years for a total of 4 years. And pending board approval, it would begin the day after, because levels right now in inventory are fine, but we're going to have a need for these products pretty soon. Any questions?
I think, Chris, I appreciate you going through this. When I initially read it, I did wonder if this was a stopgap and then we would rejoin that co-op, but it sounds like, no, we're going to have to go down our own road. Is that correct?
Well, it is possible. And once we do see the results of the cooperative bid, once it does go out, and we can look at their bid tabulation and look at compare it to our own. We do have the ability to jump into that contract if we would like and still keep ours in effect. It just allows us a little bit of freedom to be able to do that. If there's a more competitive price through the co-op because there's more buyers, then we would certainly bring that to you and ask to add that to our list of contracts, so that we have that flexibility in those stopgap areas, to be able to jump off of the one and onto the other.
Great, thank you.
Uh-huh.
And Krista, could I ask, excuse me,
Sure.
this one? So is Purizone and Hilliard, do they also typically bid, excuse me, from your past experience, bid on the co-op contract?
Yes, I have seen both of them participate in that cooperative co-op contract. And, they are aware of the situation. We had a conversation with both of them during our evaluation. Once we decided, saw that not one vendor was providing what we needed, and we knew that this co-op, would be bidding this back out again, we had that conversation with them about, just doing a dual award with these 2 firms, and then, evaluating or taking a look at any pricing that was given to the co-op. I assume that it's going to be very close to our price, but just in case it isn't, we are definitely going to just take a look at it and make sure that we are getting the best competitive price that we can.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Krista. All right, we're going to move on to item 1.07, KPM CPAs and advisors auditing services. And I'm going to ask Steve Williams to speak to this RFP.
Morning, everyone. Yes, it was time for the audit renewal, and we've been working with KPM the last 3 years, and we put that out to bid with Miss Krista's wonderful help on all her expertise on how to do that. We did receive back, I'm not sure exactly how many we sent those out to. I presume the last time we had 5, and this time we only received 2 back for the proposals. They're 2 excellent companies, thank goodness. KPM and Marr Company both replied. Obviously, we've been with KPM the last 3 years. They've done an excellent job for us. And Marr Company has been with us many years before KPM. So we've had great experience with both these companies. They're excellent, and no problem at all with their services that they would provide us. What we did was we had a committee that basically had 5 representatives that rated the proposals in 4 different areas in experience and references, personnel qualifications, approach and understanding of the scope, and the proposed cost. So we rated those rascals based on a rating scale and went through that. The combined scores basically favored KPM by the time we were done with all of them, average them together. KPM was not the lowest bid, but the other scores in the other areas did outweigh that based on the services they provide and the rating scale that we had provided. They're very competitive overall, and also KPM did propose 50 more hours of service, and I think they would have, since they've been with us the last 3 years, probably a little better understanding of their hours required probably for this job, maybe a little bit better than Mars since they've not been with us for a few years. Let's see, basically also just comments and so forth. KPM services, we've been very satisfied with what they provided us. They've actually gone over and above on many questions and assistance in other areas throughout the year, spent many hours and did not bill us as they could have for those extra services and so forth throughout the year. So the overall recommendation by the time we added it up was to recommend KPM to continue them for the next 3 years in this proposal. You can see the cost factors for over the last 3 years from what it projects. KPM came in at a total of $89,900 and Maurer Company came in at $81,970. And again, the difference might be a little bit based on the hours proposed also in that. So anything else I could help with on this proposal?
Steve, I don't have the historical context of how long we've been with KPM. I know, within companies I've worked with, it's recommended to change your audit firm every 3 to 6 years in a timely manner because you don't want the appearance of just using one audit firm over a length of time.
Okay.
That's questionable, but I don't have the historical context of school districts and their audit firms, if that's a fair comparison to compare that to the corporate world.
I understand what you're saying. And I believe that was one reason they did move probably to KPM last time, is because we had many, many years with Maurer. And I think that was probably one reason for that also. And I do believe I looked back at those proposals back then, that was also, KPM was a little higher in their cost than what Mars was at that time also. But I think that probably was the deciding factor based on what I think happened at that time. I think a lot of it also involves the experience. You want school experience for sure with auditors, so they don't bring someone in new and have to start all over with ground level of, more or less educating them on how school processes work. So you do want a school-based company that has that good base knowledge. MAR would be an excellent company, no doubt about it, based on they're currently doing schools. They have done us before also. I guess we felt extremely comfortable and appreciative of all the extra services we know we've received from KPM this year. They've gone, like I say, above and beyond with many helps on getting us through some good questions throughout the year. That kind of, I think, weighed on the decision on the point scoring and so forth.
So we've only been with KPM 3 years now.
Correct. Yeah, just 3 years. Correct. Okay. It's not like it's been many years of same.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I just didn't have that context, so appreciate that. Thanks.
Yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Williams? Okay. All right. We're going to move on to section 2, which is facilities. I'm going to turn it over to Kyle Gorell.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the bond budget update. And these budgets are still maintaining on a project basis. One thing I'll point out, just as an awareness item, we currently have about $171.5 million. $171.5 million is encumbered in the bond issues. So tremendous amount of work going on right now. And we've got some really good teams in place managing that work. There's about $52.5 million left that has not been bid or allocated. A large percentage of that will go to the middle school renovation project and the early education center project, which are the two larger projects that have not been bid yet. Overall, a positive budget picture for the bond issue. So I'll be glad to answer any questions. All right, I will move on to these next items. The next three items actually are a part of our long-range capital plan for routine maintenance items. The item 2.02 for Duranotic door is for replacing toilet partitions. And this item involves replacing partitions at 4 buildings, Richardson, Highland Park, Underwood, and Lee Summit North. We did bid some alternates to give us some flexibility in pricing, and have decided to, in order to keep this within the budget we had allocated for capital, to award the alternate to do Highland Park's work. The other alternate was for the second floor of Lee Summit North, and we will defer that to next year and continue that work at that time. These are a new partition that we've just started using last year that we've been really happy with. It's an aluminum and fiberglass reinforced plastic product that will last a very, very long time. So is there any questions that I can answer on this item? Right, thank you. So the next item is for replacing the intercom system at Highland Park Elementary. This building has its original intercom system still in place. So for an electronic system, it has served a good life. So we submitted bids through IonWave and received numbers from 2 contractors. So we are recommending award to Heartland Electric, and the alternate that was bid, the additional price was an effort to find out the cost of what IP speakers would cost in the classrooms. As you can see, they are very expensive. So we're electing not to go that route. And just the quick background, our intercom systems are all digital on the head end. That gives a lot of flexibility and programming options. But the devices that are connected are still your traditional analog type devices. And the industry has computerized IP-based devices out there, but they're still, in our opinion, kind of cost prohibitive. So we recommend award to Heartland Electric for this contract. Are there any questions? All right, the next item is it's a similar item. It's replacing fire alarm system. And we bid this, our initial long-range capital plan included 2 fire alarm systems at Richardson and Trail Ridge. And unfortunately, we only received 1 bid for this work. And so in talking with our guys, we have been having some pretty significant issues with the system at Richardson. And so we would like to just recommend doing 1 this summer, and then we'll defer and bid again next year. So Trail Ridge will be first on the list to bid next summer, and we'll continue on with that work. Just as a reminder for both intercoms and fire alarms, this is work that really, with the number of buildings we have and the life cycle of those systems, we will be replacing on average 1 a year forever in the district. So more to come. Are there any questions I can answer on this item?
I just have a quick question. In terms of the fact you only have 1 bidder, their pricing, is it within what you would have expected to budget for this item, and where we can feel confident that we have a good price for this item?
Yes, we did, Judy. We went back and looked at the bids we received last year for the fire alarm replacement that we did at Pleasantly Elementary. And we received three bids on that work, and which Heartland was one of them. The low bidder that we awarded to last year was lower than this number, but honestly, the project was problematic. We felt like they were way under. Heartland's bid was very similar by square foot to what they bid for this work, as well as the other bid that we received last year. So yeah, we feel good about the number being fair for the work being performed.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, the final bid item, or the final contract item, is a change order for the athletics project. This change order has a number of items on it. The largest, the first item, is for coordination of the security work that was not included in the original contract. We had the power and wiring for cameras and access control through the stadium project. So that amount will be charged to the security budget in the bond issue. The other items that you'll see on the change order summary, almost all of them are related to unforeseen conditions. We had power lines, sewer lines, largely at Lee Summit High School, ran into a lot of things that were just unforeseen in the ground and within structures at a couple of the buildings. And so just kind of a routine process of having renovation work. The other largest item you'll notice, the last item, or no, well, what item is it? It's for the unforeseen unsuitable soils at Lee Summit High School, COR number 17. That was related to the deep freeze. Coming out of the deep freeze in February, we had 30 inches of permafrost in the ground. And once that soil started to thaw, it all had to be removed and to make it suitable to bare structures. So in order to maintain the project schedule, we had to amend the soil and keep the project going. So are there any questions I can answer on any of these items?
I think Kyle and Dr. Miller, similar to, and I can't remember, I think it was about 2 months ago, since this is kind of split between two different areas of the bond budget, I wondered if we could update Monarch change order number 2 for athletics and security, or security and athletics, so that we're calling out that really the change order is for multiple areas.
Sure, yeah, we can definitely do that.
Great.
Similar to what we did a couple of months ago.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
I think at a glance, especially for our patrons in the community that, you know, are checking in on these items and taking a look at the agenda, but maybe don't have the time to dive into the details of this, that just helps them know at a glance that this isn't just an athletics change, it's change and security. And the bulk is really security, right, Kyle, to your point?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
Great. Thank you.
We will work on that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kyle. And I think with that, we're going to move on to our third and final section, which is finance. And we have Dawn Butler and Christy Fate here with us today. You know, over the last several months, we've talked a lot about the restricted funds, specifically the BAS fund. And we know that Dawn and Christy have drafted a written report for tomorrow night's board meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dawn and Christy to just give you a brief update and answer any questions you may have.
Good morning. Good to be with you today. Judy, Kathy, thank you for the specific work you've been doing related to everything that's happened to our community with the pandemic. I know you didn't imagine yourself there, but thank you. I would like to share with you where we are at in our budget, and then be happy to answer any questions, as Emily said. So we know that just before the pandemic came upon us, our reserves were sitting at about 540,000, and we were on target to meet budget for the year. And through various transitions, that 540,000 did not carry us. Our projected budget for the end of this fiscal year is a negative 1.5. And so you can kind of see the differences there. We've been busy over here. We've been adjusting to the different modes that the school district is in for learning, and coming behind that and supporting that with childcare, whether that is part of the day or all of the day. When we were in that all-day mode, we were serving families, and we were not receiving any additional funds. Just to give you an idea, our payroll may average around 200,000 a month. And prior to the pandemic, our average intake was near 287,000. So with the pandemic, our enrollment decreased and about 50%. And we are still sitting at that today. So our deposits, our monthly deposit for March was 163,000, and yet our payroll is just, it is above that still. So we have, in addition to our regular paying attention to the budget per se, we did several other things. We looked at our expenditures closely, reduced what we could. We had about 29 purchasing cards out there. We're down to 8. We're doing some additional bulk purchases for the department. We looked at our staffing real closely. We've done some right size staffing for the number of students that we have. And we were able to save some additional payroll costs there. However, with payroll being the majority of our budget, it just is not enough at this point to get us back into a favorable monthly situation. So we continue to watch things closely over here, and we are thankful for the support that we've received through the funds with the CRF, and then ARP. We're looking at hopefully being able to receive back some help in the area of our losses. And I'd be happy to tell you a little bit more about that. While I don't know a whole lot, I can tell you a little bit more. So I'll just kind of leave it there and see what kind of questions you have maybe that I could clear up for you.
Dawn, I want to say thank you to you and all of your staff. I think through this pandemic, you, like nutrition services, like transportation, were asked to flip on a dime, and what can we do to help our parents and our students through this. And, as a working parent over the years, I think knowing that we were offering childcare to our first responders, to many people in our community, to our teachers and staff during a lot of the closed phases, I think that just was incredible. And I thank you for thinking of all those things, for providing all those things, and to not only leveraging your staff, but I know we pulled in staff from other areas to help in your in the BASS program so that they could keep working through the pandemic. And so appreciate your leadership through all of that. I think that I really want to make sure that you hear that.
I do. Thank you.
I know the dollars and cents. I do have a question on your payroll costs. When we pulled in those additional folks from other areas, did BASS have to assume that payroll cost, or did those payroll costs stay in the areas where those folks originated from?
Thank you for asking. Those costs did stay within the departments that we were receiving help from the staff from. So we did in that cost.
Okay. And then when you mentioned that we're still at 50%, is that related to capacity constraints that we have because of the pandemic? And at what point are we looking to being a, and if the answer is yes to that, at what point are we looking to get back to normal capacity?
Yes, good question. So I wish I had a crystal ball, but I can tell you what I'm thinking. We know that our enrollment is still at half capacity. It's not because of the restrictions. It has to do with with families and whether they're back to work full time or not. And while we see our enrollment creeping up, it's slow. And we know that across the state, it's the same thing. So we're doing what everyone else is doing. We're slowly recovering. We know that for our budget to be more favorable, it would take 800 to 850 students. So we're sitting about 250 below that right now. We did open our enrollment for the fall last Monday, and right now I believe we're at 271 enrolled for next year, which is really good in comparison to previous years. I feel really strong about that, and that people are anticipating returning to work.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Dawn?
I think, and again, this may be a crystal ball question, Dr. Miller and Dawn, knowing the deficit that we're in, does it appear that the ARP funding, that we have the funding that will be able to cover this deficit?
I don't think we know that yet. Is that correct, Dawn? I mean, I know you and Steve have been active on calls, but I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Those calls have been very exciting to be a part of, because they're listening to our district and how could they best come along and assist programs that are in a school district like ours. And Steve and Sharon have been instrumental in explaining to them how that looks too. But to be able to say how it's going to roll out, it's a little too early. We know the funds are there. Now we just are in a waiting game to see how it's going to play out. So we're hopeful that it'll go the long haul for us and get us back to where we need to be quickly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just add two comments. One is in regard to the topic we were just talking about. I would just say that I participated, I think it was Monday, on the MSBA's legislative forum. And part of that conversation really was addressing these federal funds. And I think from DESE's perspective, from the legislative perspective, there's still a lot of questions about the period of time those funds are going to be available. And I mean, there's just a lot of unknowns at this point. So I do think, we should be planning for that, but also I don't think we can, necessarily 100% rely on that either. So I think, as you've indicated, you guys are continuing to do work to analyze your budget and figure out where we go from here. So I appreciate that. And I would just kind of echo Board Member Campbell's comments about your entire staff, and really in the entire staff in the district who also supported the programs that you guys were so flexible to be able to provide to our students and families. So I do appreciate that. And, it seems like a simple thing, but it's not, I know, and that's true across the board. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Judy.
Dawn and Christy, appreciate you being on the call today. All right, with that, we're going to move on to the remaining two items, and I'm going to turn it over to Steve Williams to talk through the transfer of funds and the treasurer's report and payment of bills.
Sounds great. Thank you. All right. As every month, we still need to have the teacher fund balance transfer of $2,688,090.32 this month, and that's pretty standard and normal. So I presume that's okay and ready to go. Any questions on that? All right. Super. Ms. Hannah, can you pull up the revenue and expense budget report, please? Thank you. All right, again, a small number, so we'll kind of go through it a little bit step by step if we can. And this month, really don't have any specific comments that were really out of the norm for addressing. So we'll just kind of jump down to the first part there to the left, top of the revenues, fiscal year 21 actual revenues to date. You can see the general fund has about $15.2 million accumulated in revenues to date. That is more than what the original budget was projecting. So that means we'll need to do a budget amendment. And there'll be a few more here we'll talk about in just a second too, related to budget amendments. The special revenue fund has about $67.6 million revenues to date. That totals about $182.5 million combined. That is up $13.8 million from last month. And that's a pretty typical revenue for the month. When we compare that to combining it with last year's comparisons, the general and teacher fund currently is about 88.53% of the budget, and compared to last year at this time was 83.74%. So we're in the ballpark with a little bit more than last year percentage-wise, and that turns to 4.8% more and $5.4 million actual cash in those two funds more than last year at this time. And a large portion of that is due to receiving $3.4 million in the federal stimulus monies so far in the bank. So as you know, we still have more to collect, but that's a large portion of why we're up in revenues in those two funds. And moving to the debt service fund, we have about $31.8 million in that to date. The bond has about 201.5. That's the original amount of money we received. And again, those two funds will also need to be amended based on the previous budget projections when we built it, and actual what's happening needs to be adjusted with an amendment. So we'll look at those both at revenue-wise and expenditure-wise here in just a minute. Capital projects, we have about $3.6 million in revenues. Comparing that to last year's percentage-wise, it appears about the norm for that, about 52 this year and about 50% last year at this time. So that appears to be in line with the normal revenues at this time for capital projects. Total funds to date, about $420 million combined. And that's all those funds that we just talked about. Any questions on the operating and bond and debt type funds? Okay. Restricted funds, nutrition, activity, and BAS programs. Still, they are starting to increase in revenues. Don, getting a little more revenues he just talked about. So great with that. Same thing with nutrition. When you get kids in the building, they're buying those a la carte. So that helps a little bit with the revenues. So they are making progress in that area. So that's a good thing. You can see the percentage-wise compared to last year, we're still way, way short. Again, not much we can do about that due to the COVID situation. And you'll see that also in expenditures as we talk about that. If you want to drop down to the middle part there on the expenditures, same thing, kind of go to the fiscal year 21 actual expenditures year to date. Operating money to this date as far as expenditure-wise goes, about $57.9 million. Add that to the $90.6 million for the special or teacher revenue fund. That totals up to about $148.5 million. That is up in our expenditures, $16.7 million from last month. And again, that's pretty typical for our expenditures on a monthly burn rate. So that's pretty standard. When you add those together, drop down a little bit in the middle part there, where the current combined actual percentage to date is. That shows general and teacher fund combined is about 68.97% of the expense budget. Comparing that to last year at this time was 69.71%. So we're in the ballpark with that also, about 7.74% difference from last year. That's about $3 million in expenses up from last year at this time. And I think that's what I needed to comment on that, basically. When you move over to the debt service fund, we're at $27.7 million expense to date on the debt service. And that, again, will need to be amended because the original projections did not include the bond sale estimates and the refunding estimates that were actually done that adjusted that bond service fund budget. Then the bond construction, same kind of concept, as originally estimated $50 million for that, currently spent $26.7 million. We could probably amend that too to get that more realistic to what that needs to be towards year end also. And you just saw Kyle's spreadsheet on the bond expenditures to date that should match that. Capital projects, that totals about $9.2 million to date, about 53.2% of the original budget, compared to last year's at this time, about 46.3% of that was spent at this time. Total all funds, about $212.2 million. That's 70.64% of the budget. And compared to last year at this time, that's about 71.79% at this time last year. So it appears to be in the ballpark with percentage wise. Any questions on those funds for expenditures? Okay. Turning over to the nutrition, activity, and BAS programs. Again, same situation, basically carried forward to the previous months. The expenditures kind of continue with those areas. The restricted funds and so forth are basically still due to the COVID situation. Again, not much we can do about that. And when we drop down to the lower right-hand boxes down there to show the actual cash balances at this time in those funds for the restricted, still showing about $792,000 negative for the nutrition, $1.7 million for activity, and negative $1.3 million just about for the BAS program. When we drop to the very bottom there in that little gray shaded area, just so you know what we were compared to last year at this time, cash balance wise total, those show $1.8 million in loss compared to last time in nutrition. We're down $235,000 in cash in the activity balances and down $1.7 million in the BAS program compared to last year at this time, for a total of about $3.8 million. So it did get better from last month. So we're up almost $200,000 total. So they are making some progress, but we're still going to be negative by year end comes with all these funds with the restricted. Any questions on the restricted funds and cash balances? Okay.
You know, Steve, I don't have a specific question related to this, but I do wonder, you know, a lot of times looking at current to last year, you use that as a comparison factor, as you've kind of noted as we've gone through this, to say, you know, we're pretty much in alignment. We're pretty much, and so I wonder, knowing a year ago was March, April, May, mid-pandemic, are we noting, or should we be noting, pandemic years kind of going forward for a time so that we're not as much relying on those comparisons? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
I think so, totally, because you're right. Next year comparisons are going to be blown out of the water. I mean,
right.
That's going to be very difficult. So I think we kind of look at these comparisons, say bottom line last year, how negative we were. Hopefully we're back to a positive manner, but you're right. You're exactly right. I don't know how to compare those right off the bat right now. So I might need to do some thinking on that and get some help. You're exactly right. How to compare that is going to be a new ball game because it is not normal.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Thanks for that question.
Excuse me. Yeah, you have an excellent point. And I don't know how we're all going to compare this going forward to be, you know, on an average basis, because there is nothing average about this.
Right. Right.
Good point. So going forward, a good thing to kind of note going forward next year's notes, hey, the pandemic situation, not comparable at all. Because it's going to look, hopefully next year with all these activity programs are going to be looking great. Okay, good comment, but you're exactly right. How to address it, I'll need a little help on. Okay, then if we want to show cash on the left-hand bottom side there, let's look at the operating monies for the general and teacher funds compared to last year. So we can do that same kind of a thing there we just talked about. We currently have about $92.7 million combined cash balance for the general and teacher funds. That's 43.07%. That is up $3.2 million from last year, and that's up 0.15%. So that is, I think, a pretty fair comparison. And again, I think that's mainly due to the revenue from the stimulus money, again, coming in for those funds at this time. Any questions on that fund balances and cash? Okay, perfect. Then if we could switch over to the actual balance sheet, that shows real quick, like the cash balances. There we go. Thank you, Hannah. That's just summarizing the individual funds in cash again that we just kind of talked about on the front side there in the bottom part. The details of the assets, the liabilities, and the fund balances for each individual fund that way. And at the very bottom, you'll notice the liabilities and fund balances amount for $92.8 million in the general fund, and you can see each of the individual funds coming across. That amount in the general fund, we subtract off the liabilities of the $75,800. That's the $92,700 that I used on the front part to compare the actual cash balances to last year on the balance sheet we just talked about. So anyway, bottom line, we have about $322 million in the bank, total all budgets, all funds, and that balances with our cash balance that we sent out also for the details. Any questions on that report? All righty. And if we can move to the investment report, thank you. All right, what we have invested right now with the Payne Weber accounts is $30,100,000 basically. We add that to the $77.5 million in the MOSIP accounts, plus the $40 million individually invested in the MOSIP accounts. That gives us a total of $147.6 million in investments as of 3/31/21. Prior year at this time that was invested is almost $5 million. So we're in the ballpark with that. Again, a little bit up. And the restricted bond investments for the construction totals $172.8 million. So as we spend those construction funds, obviously that comes down each time we have to make the payments. And that gives us a total of $320.5 million grand total. And that should be 2021 grand total, not 2020. I'll change that for next time. The in co-investments, including bond funds at this time. Are there any questions on that report I can help with? All righty. I think that concludes the monthly finance reports then, and that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Board Member Campbell, Board Member Hedrick, any lingering questions that you have?
Hey, I just have a quick question and really it's not so much related to finance, but we are scheduled for our tour tomorrow night.
Mm-hmm.
So should we plan on like footwear that it's going to be muddy or whatever? I'm just wanting to try to be prepared because I know we're going directly from there to our board meeting. So sorry, I just thought of that as I'm like looking at being in my backyard is like a swamp still.
So Kyle,
yeah. It will be a requirement to have closed shoes, toes and heels. Other than that, we feel like we'll have the site in good shape for you guys, so you're not, in a muddy state going to the board meeting. The road, the service road down to the site has been redressed with rock and is in decent shape. We are going to allow some parking up at the top of the hill on the rock, and then so if people aren't comfortable driving their cars down to the site, we can shuttle people down. There's a a gator, and they've got a couple of pickup trucks that can get people down to the site. The construction trailer has been moved down to the middle school parking lot area. So there is a lot of vehicle traffic that's going down to the southern part of the site. So you will be wearing a hard hat, so I can't guarantee you what your hair is going to look like for the board
Oh,
meeting.
no. Thank you. I appreciate that update.
But
All right. Well, thanks everyone for being on the call. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow night.
Thank all of you.
Thank you. Have a good day.